Welcome, believers. Welcome, conspiracy theorists. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of UFO aliens and weird stuff. So, if we're gonna follow the UK UFO sightings on my map, we have to cover the Calvine photo, right? Now, before we go any further, the Calvine photo clearly shows a diamond-shaped UFO, or could we compare it to maybe like a kite? Now, that is very similar to the 1977 Windermere sighting. 13 coppers chased what they called a kite-shaped UFO. Is it connected, right? Or the Penrick incident. Kaz Clark called the UFO she saw a pyramid-shaped UFO. Not exactly the same, but very near. I mean, that happened in Cardiff, Wales in 2016. Are they connected? The beauty about logging incidents on the map is we get to compare sightings. So behind me, we have the north and we have the Highlands, right? Now, the Calvine incident was taken in the Highlands. Over there, we have the southern map, and I'll show you a photo of it. Now, I haven't quite sussed out how I can walk around and point and talk at the same time. But you never know what Santa will bring, all right? So, the Calvine UFO picture. I'll get all my information from a website called UFO Insight. I love it. I love it. I simply love it. Check it out. It's amazing. Pay a little bit, a tiny, tiny little subscription. There is some great information out there, and the bloke who writes is really good. It's not the only UFO Insight. Sorry, it's not the only website I use. I mean, nowadays the internet is not as fantastic as what people think it is. And as I continue, I will buy some books and I'll get some more information so we can fill the map up, all right? So, the Calvine UFO photo, so called because it happened just outside of Calvine in Scotland. But the picture has proved to be one of the most intriguing, enduring, and controversial pieces of evidence for potential ET vehicles in history. And I kind of agree and disagree with that. I mean, the Rex Heflin photos are really, really great. I'll put it there. That's your Rex Heflin photo. That's really cool. But yeah, I agree. And with the mysterious person who took the picture having seemingly been named recently, it has found itself once again in the glare of the UFO community. And I am going to stick it there because it's my map and I'm going to, right? Is the photograph genuine? And if so, does it really show a vehicle from another world? Or is it a highly advanced craft of the military? And just why has the person who took the picture seemingly gone out their way to stay out of the limelight all these years? I am going to say, right now, that is not a military vehicle. Some people would disagree with me, of course. But like I say, if you go back to the 1977 Windermere incident, and it's on my YouTube channel, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be fantastic, right? Now, I've called it the Lake District incident. And they described a kite-shaped UFO in 1977, exactly the same as that Calvine photo, I would add. All right, so that does give it some sort of credibility. Indeed, we shall see, right, the Calvine UFO photograph has discreetly, until very recent times, been one of the most intriguing, mysterious and fascinating pictures in UFO history, as are the events that surround it. Right, now, several researchers have examined this photo and the history behind it. Arguably, the most thorough and extensive being the work of Dr. David Clark, whose work I recommend you check it out in full, right? Now, I have done a little bit, typed his name in, Dave Clark, found his website, and I'll quote you from it, right? Only a little bit. He says, after 30 years immersed in the world of UFOlogy, I have grown cynical after viewing hundreds of unconvincing photographs and films. Now, most were blurred, grainy, and out of focus shots of what could only have been described as frisbees, street lamps, and even seagulls. But when retired RAF officer Craig Lindsay showed me the only surviving print of the Calvine UFO photo he had kept safe for more than 3 decades, I knew I was looking at something exceptional. And that is his words. I've took it off of his website, all right? So check him out, all right? David Clark, it's worth a look. Now, most sources agree that the photograph was taken on the afternoon of August the 4th, 1990, when 2 unknown men were walking towards the town of Calvine. As they did so, they suddenly noticed a large diamond-shaped object overhead. They estimated this strange craft was around 100 feet long and was completely silent. The completely silent thing, I love that, all right, because as far as I know, and quote me if I'm wrong, nothing man made is silent. Everything has a noise. Then things turned even stranger. Out of nowhere, an RAF Tornado jet appeared and proceeded to circle the object. What rules out a balloon? All right, if an RAF jet circled the balloon, it would flap all over the place. And at this point, one of the men reached for a camera they happened to be carrying and managed to capture several pictures. That one there, right? The next thing the pair realised, the object ascended directly upwards at a blistering pace and disappeared from sight. That rules out a glider. Hey, gliders don't ascend straight into the air and disappear outside, do they? Now, realising they had captured something truly out of the ordinary in the picture, they approached the newspaper in the hope that they would print them, right? However, rather strangely, no story on the sighting would ever run, and the pictures found their way to the Ministry of Defence. How strange that the picture found its way to the MODA, right? Now, from there, the incident was seemingly forgotten until the release of a book called Open Skies, Closed Minds by UK researcher. Good God, you can trip yourself over there. By UK UFO researcher Nick Pope, in which he wrote of the incident. Now, according to Pope, the picture was studied by several people at the Ministry of Defence, and it is claimed that the photograph was one piece of evidence that began to shift his mindset from being sceptical to believing. He says there was more to UFO sightings than what he had first thought. Now, although the knowledge of the photograph had been in the public arena since the mid-1990s through Pope's book, and I'll stick a picture there of it, right? There it is. It wasn't until decades later, at the start of 2020, when David Clarke undertook his extensive research into the case, that it was catapulted back into the limelight. Now, Pope would offer to David Clarke during this interview that he had first seen the photograph while working for the MOD in poster form, and that someone had enlarged the picture for study, right, and stuck it on the wall. Pope would add that the picture had certainly been looked at and analysed by several people, and it was largely believed to be a picture of a solid structured craft and not a hoax. In short, many people in the MOD, at least according to Pope, was that the picture was for real. Now, Pope went on to reveal that shortly after this, many began to question if the object was in fact an alleged top-secret United States aircraft that had been developed under a project named Uhura. Uhura. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. There it is. Uhura, right? Pope would record that there was a lot of defence mentality specifically around these claims, and that would make sense for the military, wouldn't it? He would ultimately state that one of his superiors entered his office one day and removed the poster and proceeded to lock it in his drawer. And according to Pope, to the best of his knowledge, it likely remains there today. And he was speaking in 2001. Now, interestingly, Pope would offer to David Clarke that he made several attempts in asking American sources if they had such a top-secret aircraft. Now, they replied that they didn't, and seemingly asked Pope if the British military might have an aircraft like the one he was describing, as they too also had reports of such a craft. So the Americans assume that it's British, and the British assume that it's American. Now, one of Clarke's research team members, and Matthew Ealesley, would state to the Falkirk Herald in January 2023, after seemingly tracking down the photograph, realised that there was a name on the back of it. Now, the Falkirk Herald. Now, the Calvine incident happened in the Highlands. That is not that far away from the Falkirk Triangle, right? That is right by Edinburgh, Glasgow and Stirling. the Falkirk Triangle. Now, I know I haven't covered it yet, and I will get to it. That is a major hotspot for UFO activity, and that virtually is just up the road. It's just up the road from the Calvine incident. So you can see why the Falkirk Herald got involved, right? Now, he said after seemingly tracking down the photograph, realised there was a name on the back of it. The photograph was passed to Matthew Ilsley by the retired RA officer Craig Lindsay, who had discreetly kept the photograph secretly at home. And we know this because we already spoke about him, didn't we? Now, writing in the Daily Mail, Dave Clark stated that as soon as the RAF officer Lindsay showed him the photograph, he realised he was looking at something exceptional, offering that while it looked a little blurry, as if the photographer took it in a moment of panic, this was consistent with the story. He would further offer that he was no gullible, deluded conspiracy theorist, and like many UFO images, this is clearly a structured craft of unknown origin that looks otherworldly and unlike any conventional craft. So like we said before, David Clark knows a photograph when he sees one, right? He's been studying them for years, and this, to him, was the first one that he was convinced was genuine. Now, what's more, David Clark will confirm that he had the photograph analysed by a senior lecturer of photography at Sheffield Hallam University, and the bloke's name is Andrew Robinson, whose conclusions was that it had not been tampered with and was genuine. Indeed, we have to ask, if it was a fake, then why had the photographer remained silent for over 3 decades without attempting to cash in on their image? Now, if you go back a little bit, he did try to give it to a newspaper, didn't he, right? And the newspaper said, yeah, we'll take it. But then they gave it to the MOD. So he did try to get the photograph out there, but he always kept his name out of it. So if it was a fake, he wasn't going to make no money and he wasn't going to get no fame. Now, David Clark would offer that Robinson informed him that the object was definitely in front of the camera and was not a fake produced in post-production. Now, gang, I don't know how old you are, right? But in 1990, I was doing scooter rallies, and I remember that no one really had a phone. The first person who had a mobile phone, like a proper mobile phone and not a brick, that some electricians had in those days, it was a proper mobile phone, was my friend called Ray. And it was amazing. He had a phone, man. And that was in the 1990s. There was no smartphones out or anything like that. And there certainly wasn't Photoshop. So if you were going to produce a fake, you was clever, right? So RAF officer Lindsay would continue that he met with the photographer of the UFO over 3 decades ago. And it was clear to him that the young man was scared and unsettled by what he had seen, and certainly didn't appear to be making up the incidents. Now, RAF officer Lindsay would state to Clark that due to his job as a press officer for RAF in Scotland, he had dealt with many UFO reports, although most of these turned out to be nothing but strange lights. He would state it was obvious that this was not the case with the Calvine UFO photograph. He would further recall that when the witness told him that the object was completely silent and didn't make any noise at all, that he began to realise that the object was potentially something out of the ordinary, offering that there was no aircraft that he was aware of that didn't make any noise. And I totally agree with that. It's 1990. We're not talking about 2025. And we know that Skunk Works and Lockheed, they are doing weird and wonderful stuff, definitely. And I do believe that they're cross-engineering UFOs. I do. But in 1990, is it possible that something was flying in the air that made no noise? Now, we've ruled out air balloons, haven't we? Now, that could float there, but if that tornado circled the balloon, the air would get it to flutter, all right? And we've ruled out what they call them, gliders, because it ascended and disappeared. Gliders don't do that, all right? So this vehicle made no noise. Now, it was RAF officer Lindsay who sent copies of the pictures to the newspaper, as well as faxing a copy to the MOD. Now, according to his recollection, the MOD contacted him almost immediately Hang on, according to his recollection, the MOD contacted him almost immediately, asking what other information he had on the sighting and if he still had the negatives. Interestingly, keeping in mind Pope's version of events in open skies, closed mines, when he did go to the MOD, he actually did see the photograph blown up to poster size on the wall. And you know what? I might do the same. I might stick it in my shed somewhere, right? Now, ultimately, RAF officer Lindsay was told to leave it to London and not to investigate the sighting any further. So as the years went on, he heard nothing more of the sighting, but kept the original photograph in a desk drawer at home. He would state to Dave Clark that it was his hope that the two witnesses would come forward one day and tell their own story. Now, originally, the identity of the photographer was held from the public, with Matthew Ealesley, remember Clark's research team member, stating that they had made attempts to track down as many people as possible who might recall the individual concerned. So in March 2023, it appeared the name of the photographer had been revealed as Kevin Russell. Now, it would appear he worked as a porter at the nearby hotel where he see the sighting for several years before allegedly returning to Glasgow, right? So in 2023, let me pause that, right? In 2023, it appeared the name of the photographer had been revealed as a bloke called Kevin Russell. And it would appear, as I said, he worked as a porter in the nearby Pitlochry Hydro Hotel, what's only just down the road from Calvine, all right? But then he allegedly returned to Glasgow. And why wouldn't you, I suppose, you know? Now, research team member Matthew Ealesley did extensive researches in an attempt to locate Kevin Russell. Now, he discovered records of 300 people by the name of men in their 50s, as Kevin Russell would be then when he was investigated in Scotland alone, and a further 150 from elsewhere, like in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia. He really did investigate it. However, despite painstakingly contact each one, none of the person were the person they were looking for. Now, many researchers and aviation experts have pondered, for example, whether the object in the Calvine UFO photograph was, in fact, an aircraft connected to the Aurora program. An apparent, as we say, top secret hypersonic aircraft that was rumoured to have been operating out of the United States air bases in Scotland as far back as the early 1990s and right after the picture was taken. But that doesn't explain the 1977 Lake District incident, does it? When 13 police saw that very object, probably, and they chased it. 13 policemen saw an object very much like that in 1977, and 13 years later, it turns out in Calvine. I mean, that is evidence alone to strengthen the fact that it probably wasn't a military aircraft, right? A document from since declassified files showing that there was some concern regarding this sighting, right? So a declassified file is surfaced saying that the American government were a little bit worried about what this thing could be. So that also strengthens the fact that it probably wasn't a military exercise. Now, if there was any truth to this, then we might ask if other UFO sightings, particularly around the same time, were also secret advanced military vehicles. But I'm telling you, it's not. Indeed, the more we find out about the incidents, the more questions come up. And to make things even more treacherous, these questions, for it now at least, head in two distinct directions, don't they, right? So, is the Calvine photo a UFO, or is it a top secret military exercise? What do you think? I'm going to buy that it isn't. Like I said, it's ironic, isn't it? In 1977, 13 coppers saw the same thing, perhaps. It is perhaps interesting that with everything we know about the Calvine UFO photograph, there are many people even in the UFO community, who reject the photograph as genuine, with some offering it as merely a spy plane of the US military, with others insisting it's nothing but a hoax. But I don't think it is. It is often said that skeptics will not be converted into believing even the possibility of visitors from another world until a photograph is taken. However, when this happens, as it appears likely with the Calvine UFO picture, it is still rejected as proof of something out of the ordinary. And when we get that nowadays with AI, mate, we are doomed, aren't we? You know, it is hard to decide whether it is true or it is fake. So that's why I've gone back to my UFO maps to build a case from the early days. You know, there is weird stuff out there, right? But with the AI, and you get on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, you get all these things, you can tell. Right, you can tell there are still genuine photos out there. There are still genuine videos out there, you know. But if they're really, really clear and they're really, really obvious, you have to go, oh yeah, AI. But they might not be. That's the trouble. Where do we stand with that? All right. Just what was the let's go back to this, right? Just what was the strange object witnessed over the town of Calvine that evening in the summer of 1990? If there was nothing to the object, why do the military wish certain files connected to the case to remain classified well into the year 2070? Despite the 30-year rule on such information, although the National Archives insist that only the names of those involved are subject to this rule, it is certainly an area for suspicion, isn't it, that they do not want to disclose it. We would, for example, suspect if the object was simply an experimental craft, details of it would be safe to enter into the public arena 30 years later. I don't know if I agree with that, you know, because if you're in the military, you do have to be a cagey and you do have to be secret about stuff that the Americans, the British, the Russians, the Chinese, they all develop their own stuff and they want to keep it to themselves, right? Now, the twists and turns that the Calvine UFO photograph and the events surrounding it have taken only to go and show how murky the world of UFO research actually is. Right, so I'm going to read that again, right? The twists and turns that the Calvine UFO photograph and the events surrounding it has taken. Is it real? Is it not? Is it military? Is it not? Are they fake? Is it a hoax? Just goes to show how murky the world of UFO research actually is, you know. And it always will be. You are never going to know the truth, and you are never going to get disclosure as far as I'm concerned. All you can do is your own investigation and make up your own mind. Unless something like Atlas 31 drops out of hyperspace and says we are occupants of interplanetary craft, there will always be government cover-ups, hush-ups, dare I say it, people dying mysteriously. They say there is more evidence, there is so much evidence to suggest these craft exist that if you were on a murder trial with the same level of evidence, you'd get banged up. All right. So what do you think? Well, the map. As I've said before, this is the northern side of it. You've got Edinburgh, Lothian, Northumberland, Falkirk, Glasgow, South Lancashire, Kilmarnock. Right over there, you've got Fort William, Calvin, and Loch Ness and Inverness. Right over there is the southern side of it, right up to Staffordshire. And as I say, I will eventually think of somewhere that I can walk around and we can talk about it at the same time and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So this was UFOs, Aliens and Weird Stuff. I appreciate you sticking around and watching till the end. Please like, subscribe and ding that notification bell if you can. Follow me on YouTube. That would be fantastic. And I will catch you on the next one. Thanks very much.